The sun had barely risen over the quiet suburban streets of Houston, Texas, but Vanessa Washington was already awake, her thoughts consumed by the weight of her new reality. At 47, Vanessa had spent the last 20 years of her life as a prominent attorney, known for her sharp mind and unwavering dedication. But now, with the sudden loss of her husband, Luke, in a tragic car accident, everything had changed. She sat at her kitchen table, the morning light streaming in through the window, casting a soft glow over her coffee cup. The silence in the house was deafening. It had been 3 months since Luke's death, and yet it felt like a lifetime. Vanessa could still hear his voice in the halls, feel his presence in the air. But all that was left now were the memories, the pain, and the $5 million insurance payout that Luke had left her. It was strange, really. Luke had always been a man of few words, but he had planned for their future. His death had not only left a void in her heart, but had also opened doors to a world of opportunities, ones that she never thought she would be dealing with. The insurance policy, which was supposed to be a safety net for their future, now felt more like a curse. She hadn't asked for this money, but it was hers nonetheless. Vanessa hadn't shared the news with anyone, not even her daughter, Jasmine. Jasmine, now 23, was dealing with her own grief and confusion, still trying to find herself in a world without her father. Vanessa had made the decision to keep the inheritance a secret, unsure of how it would change their already strained relationship. She had no desire for Jasmine to feel entitled to the money, nor did she want anyone, especially not Jasmine's boyfriend Chris, to think that she was an easy target. But 3 days later, everything was about to change. The knock on the door was soft but insistent. Vanessa stood up slowly, her heart racing as she made her way to the front door. She opened it to find Chris, Jasmine's boyfriend, standing there with a serious look on his face. He was holding a folder, the edges crisp and professional, and Vanessa could feel the tension in the air the moment she saw him. "Mrs. Washington," Chris began, his voice smooth, but there was something cold in his eyes. "I need to speak with you. It's about Jasmine and the future of this family." Vanessa's stomach tightened. She knew that this conversation wasn't going to be about condolences or support. Chris had been in their lives for a while now, but there was always something about him that set Vanessa on edge. He was charming, yes, but there was an undercurrent of manipulation in everything he did. And now, standing in her doorway, he was about to make his move. "Come in," Vanessa said, her voice steady despite the unease that gripped her chest. As he stepped inside, Vanessa's mind raced. What did he want? And why did he come with a contract? The first sign of trouble, Chris entered the living room, his footsteps too confident for her liking. Vanessa could feel the tension rising, like the calm before a storm. She motioned for him to sit down, her eyes narrowing slightly as she watched him take a seat across from her. The contract was still clutched tightly in his hands, and Vanessa knew, instinctively, that something wasn't right. "Mrs. Washington," Chris began, his voice now softer, more reassuring. "I've been thinking a lot about Jasmine and our future together. We both want what's best for her, right?" His words sounded genuine enough, but the underlying tone, a subtle, calculating edge, sent a chill through Vanessa. Vanessa took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "What's this about, Chris?" she asked, her voice steady but her mind racing. She was still trying to make sense of why he was here, why he needed to talk to her about Jasmine in such a formal manner. He placed the folder on the coffee table, leaning forward slightly. "I know Jasmine means the world to you, and I want to be a part of that. A family, I mean," he said, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But to make that happen, there's something we need to arrange. It's for her future, and honestly, it's for the good of the entire family." Vanessa's eyes flickered down to the folder, her heart sinking. She could already feel the subtle manipulation at play, the way he was trying to make her believe that this was somehow for Jasmine's benefit. But Vanessa was no fool. She had Been in the legal world long enough to recognize when someone was playing games. What are you getting at, Chris? She asked, her voice growing firmer, more authoritative. Chris hesitated for a moment, then slid the folder toward her. This contract is a formality. Jasmine and I have been talking, and we both agree that it's the right move for the future. He paused, watching her closely as if searching for a reaction. We just need your signature, Mrs. Washington. It'll ensure that everything stays in order. Vanessa's fingers brushed over the folder, her instincts screaming at her to decline, to send him packing. The last thing she wanted was to get involved in whatever scheme he was trying to pull. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning, that something far worse was coming. She glanced at Chris, his eyes never leaving hers. There was something unsettling about the way he was looking at her, almost like he was sizing her up, waiting for the right moment to strike. Vanessa knew she couldn't let her guard down. Not with him. I don't know about this, Chris, Vanessa said slowly, her voice laced with suspicion. I'm not sure what you're asking me to sign. Chris leaned back in his chair, his smile widening ever so slightly. It's just a precaution, Mrs. Washington. You can trust me. Jasmine and I want to make sure everything is handled properly. You don't want to leave any loose ends, do you? The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. Vanessa's gut told her that whatever this contract was, it wasn't for Jasmine's benefit. It was for Chris, and that thought alone made her blood run cold. I'll think about it, Vanessa replied coolly, her voice now firm and resolute. But I need more time. Chris's expression shifted for the briefest of moments, his friendly demeanor cracking just enough to show the irritation beneath. But then, just as quickly, his smile returned, as if nothing had happened. Of course, he said, standing up. Take all the time you need, but just remember, the offer stands. As he walked toward the door, Vanessa could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on her. She hadn't agreed to anything, but she knew that this was just the beginning. Chris had shown his hand, and now it was up to her to figure out what game he was really playing. She closed the door behind him, her mind racing with questions. Why had he come? What was he really after? And most importantly, how far was he willing to go to get what he wanted? Escalation of the conflict. The days following Chris's visit felt suffocating. Vanessa couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking on eggshells, each step more careful than the last. Chris had left her with that contract, a reminder that there were forces at play that she wasn't fully aware of. Jasmine, of course, had no idea about the visit, and Vanessa was doing everything she could to keep it that way. She didn't want to alarm her daughter, but at the same time, she couldn't ignore the unease that had settled deep in her gut. That evening, Vanessa found herself sitting at the kitchen table, a glass of wine in front of her, her fingers drumming nervously on the edge of the glass. She couldn't focus on anything. Her mind kept drifting back to the same question. What was Chris really after? It wasn't just the contract, though. The way he had looked at her, the subtle pressure in his voice, it had all felt too calculated. She knew Chris wasn't the kind of man to sit back and let things unfold. He was a man with a plan, and Vanessa had a sinking feeling that he wasn't just after a signature. No, there was something more, something she wasn't seeing yet. Vanessa's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Jasmine, her face clouded with worry. "Mom, can we talk?" "Of course, sweetheart," Vanessa said, forcing a smile as she stood to greet her daughter. She had to keep her composure, no matter how much her insides were twisted in knots. Jasmine stepped into the room, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking about Chris, about everything that's been going on. I know things have been hard, but I feel like something's off." Vanessa's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected Jasmine to bring it up, not yet. But there it was, the question she had feared. "Sweetheart, what do you mean?" Vanessa asked, trying to keep her voice as calm as possible. Jasmine bit her lip, her eyes searching her mother's. face for any hint of reassurance. "It's just that he's been acting strange lately. He's been pushing for me to sign something that has to do with our future. He says it's important, but I don't know. I don't feel right about it." Vanessa froze. The tension in the room thickened. She had to keep her cool. "Jasmine, you don't have to sign anything you're not comfortable with. You need to take your time, think it through. I don't trust him, and you shouldn't either." Jasmine nodded, slowly, but the doubt was still there in her eyes. "But he's been so convincing, Mom. He says it's for the best for both of us. I don't know what to believe anymore." Vanessa's mind raced, trying to piece together the puzzle. Chris wasn't just manipulating her, he was manipulating Jasmine as well. He had been working his way into her life, slowly but surely, and now he was trying to secure his position through her. Vanessa could see the control tightening around her daughter, and it made her blood boil. "I don't want you getting caught up in anything that could hurt you, Jasmine," Vanessa said, her voice firm but filled with concern. "I'll take care of it. You just focus on staying safe." As Jasmine left the room, still unsure and conflicted, Vanessa's resolve hardened. She knew she had to act quickly. Chris was playing a long game, and if she didn't do something soon, he might just win. The next day, Vanessa began digging into Chris's background. She called in a few favors, using her legal contacts to gather information about his past. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how deep his web of lies and manipulation went. He wasn't just a charming young man in love with her daughter. He was a predator, using Jasmine as a pawn in his scheme to get what he wanted. As Vanessa connected the dots, the scope of the situation became clear. Chris wasn't just after the insurance money. He was after control, power, and the destruction of everything Vanessa had worked for. And Jasmine was at the center of it all. Vanessa's hands trembled as she looked over the files in front of her. She could no longer afford to be passive. She had to stop him before it was too late. Breaking point. Vanessa stood by the window, staring out at the street below. The world outside seemed so normal, so unaffected by the chaos unfolding in her own home. The contrast was jarring, and she felt trapped in a bubble, unable to escape. Her thoughts were spinning, each one more desperate than the last. Chris had already pushed too far, and Vanessa knew she had to do something, but she wasn't sure what. It had been a week since Jasmine had first mentioned Chris's strange behavior, and things had only escalated. Vanessa had been trying to keep things calm, to avoid confrontation, but every time Chris called or showed up at the door, it felt like a tightening vice around her neck. Tonight, however, was different. Vanessa had just returned from a late meeting with one of her old legal contacts, a retired judge who had helped her dig deeper into Chris's past. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, and she didn't like what she saw. Chris had a history, one that was far from clean. His past was filled with shady deals, manipulative schemes, and a trail of broken relationships. It was clear now. Chris wasn't just after money. He was after everything Vanessa held dear. A soft knock on the door broke her thoughts, and for a moment, her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not Chris. But she knew it was him. He had a way of showing up at the worst possible moments, as if he could sense her vulnerability. Taking a deep breath, Vanessa opened the door. There he was, standing in the hallway, his smile wide, but his eyes cold. His usual charm was still in place, but there was something different about him tonight. He looked more determined, more dangerous. "Vanessa, we need to talk," Chris said, his voice smooth but firm. "I'm not leaving until we sort this out." Vanessa's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the familiar tension rise in the air. He was pushing again, just like before. But this time, she couldn't let it go on any longer. She couldn't keep hiding behind a mask of politeness and patience. If she didn't confront him now, she knew he would only push harder. Chris, I've had enough, she said, her voice steady but laced with an authority she hadn't used in a while. I know what you're doing, and I'm not going to let you manipulate me or my daughter any longer. His smile faltered, just for a moment, but then he regained his composure. What are you talking about? He asked, feigning innocence. I'm just trying to help Jasmine. We're a family now, Vanessa. You need to understand that. Vanessa's jaw tightened. You're not helping anyone. You've been using Jasmine from the start, and you've been using me too. Chris stepped forward, his expression hardening. You don't know what you're talking about. This is for her future, for both of your futures. You're making a mistake. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a surge of strength, a clarity that she hadn't realized she was capable of. She wasn't the victim anymore. She wasn't going to let him manipulate her or control her family any longer. Leave, Chris, she said, her voice low but filled with finality. And don't come back. I'm not signing anything, and I'm not going to let you destroy my daughter's life. Chris's face twisted in anger, but Vanessa didn't flinch. She was done. Done with the lies, done with the manipulation, and done with living in fear. For a long moment, Chris just stood there, glaring at her. But then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the door. Vanessa stood in the doorway for a moment, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Her heart was racing, but a sense of relief began to wash over her. She had finally taken control. But she knew this wasn't over. Chris wouldn't back down so easily. As the door closed behind him, Vanessa knew that the battle was only just beginning. Discovery of resources, the following days were a blur of tension and uncertainty. Vanessa had made the decision to stand firm against Chris, but she knew this was just the first step. She couldn't afford to be passive anymore, not when the stakes were this high. Chris had made his move, but now it was her turn. Vanessa had always been a woman who relied on her mind, her legal training, her intellect. She didn't back down from a challenge, especially one that involved protecting her family. But she knew she needed more than just resolve. She needed resources, something to tip the scales in her favor. The moment she had sent Chris packing, Vanessa had felt a flicker of something deeper within her. It wasn't just relief, it was empowerment. She had a wealth of untapped knowledge and connections. She hadn't fully realized how much she had buried away until now. Her years in law had left her with a network of people she had worked with, trusted, and who owed her favors. And now she would call in those favors. She had a meeting scheduled with an old contact, a former colleague named Adrian, who had moved into private security and investigative work. He had been a valuable ally during her legal career, and she knew he could help her now. He had connections in places that Vanessa could never have dreamed of. When she arrived at his office, a sleek, modern space on the edge of downtown Houston, she felt a sense of determination flood her veins. This was it. This was where she would find the key to turning the tables on Chris and securing her family's future. Adrian greeted her with a warm handshake, his sharp eyes studying her with immediate concern. "Vanessa, it's been too long," he said, motioning for her to sit down. "What's going on? You look intense." Vanessa didn't waste any time. "I need information. I need to know everything about Chris," she said, her voice low and determined. "Everything." Adrian raised an eyebrow but didn't question her. "You're in trouble, I take it?" Vanessa nodded. "I don't trust him. I never did, but now I know he's up to something. He's not who he says he is, and he's not just after the insurance money. I need to know what I'm dealing with. I need to be ready for whatever comes next." Adrian leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping thoughtfully on the desk. "All right, I can help with that. Give me a day or two, and I'll get you the full picture. I'll run a full background check, family, finances, anything I can dig up. And I'll also reach out to some of my contacts in law enforcement. We'll see what kind of trouble he's been in." Vanessa's heart raced. This was the information she needed to stay one step ahead of Chris. She felt the weight of the situation press down on her, but she also felt a spark of hope. She wasn't alone in this anymore. She had resources, people who could help her win this battle. "Thank you, Adrian," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Adrian smiled. "You'd figure it out, but I'll make sure you don't have to. I'll get started on this right away. You'll have the information you need soon." As Vanessa left his office, a sense of purpose filled her. The pieces were falling into place, and now she had the tools to protect herself and her daughter from the man who had been creeping into their lives with nothing but lies and manipulation. She had the upper hand, and she was ready to use it. Back. At home, Vanessa sat down at her desk, her mind racing with strategies and plans. But in the back of her mind, one question lingered. How far was Chris willing to go to get what he wanted? She couldn't afford to underestimate him. She had no illusions now. This fight was just beginning. Strategic planning, Vanessa's pulse quickened as she sat in front of her computer, reviewing the information Adrian had gathered. It was more than she had expected. Much more. Chris's history wasn't just murky. It was downright dangerous. His name had come up in several shady dealings, some of which hinted at illegal activities, though nothing concrete had ever stuck. He had a reputation for being a smooth talker, a manipulator who wormed his way into people's lives with ease, and then, when the time was right, took what he wanted. Adrian had also given her a few warnings. Chris had a temper. He was unpredictable. And most unsettling of all, he had a history of making people disappear when they got in his way. That last bit had sent chills down her spine. The man she had dismissed as a mere opportunist was much more dangerous than she had realized. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her mind working overtime. She had always been good at reading people, at strategizing, but this was different. Chris wasn't just a simple adversary. He was a threat to everything she had built, to her daughter's future, to her own peace of mind. She knew she couldn't just play defense. She had to go on the offensive, and she had to be smart about it. The first step was to cut him off from all potential access to Jasmine and the money. That meant no more contact, no more subtle manipulation, no more allowing him to worm his way into their lives. But she also had to prepare for the possibility that Chris wouldn't go down without a fight. He wouldn't just walk away. The first move would be to get Jasmine fully on her side. She knew her daughter loved Chris, but Jasmine was still young, still idealistic, still wanting to believe the best in people. Vanessa had to shatter that illusion, and she had to do it carefully. If she pushed too hard, Jasmine might rebel, and that was the last thing she wanted. Vanessa picked up the phone, dialing her daughter's number. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before Jasmine answered, her voice sleepy but warm. "Mom?" Jasmine said, her tone shifting to concern. "What's going on?" "Jasmine, I need you to listen to me," Vanessa said, her voice calm but firm. "I know this is hard, but you have to trust me. Chris is not who he says he is. He's not good for you, and he's been manipulating you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and Vanessa could practically hear her daughter's thoughts racing. "What do you mean, Mom?" Jasmine asked, confusion and hurt creeping into her voice. "Chris loves me." "Jasmine, I'm not asking you to stop loving him," Vanessa said gently, her voice softening. "I'm asking you to see the truth. He's been using you to get to me, and he's been using your love for him to manipulate both of us." Jasmine was quiet for a moment, and when she finally spoke, her voice was shaky. "How do you know this?" "I've seen it, sweetie," Vanessa said, her heart breaking for the daughter she loved so much. "I've done the research. I've seen his past. He's dangerous. I don't want you to be a part of whatever he's trying to do." "I don't know what to believe," Jasmine whispered. "I love him, Mom. I really do." "I know, baby. I know, Vanessa replied, her heart aching for her. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to protect yourself. And I'm doing everything I can to protect you. Jasmine's breathing slowed, and for a moment, Vanessa wasn't sure if she had gotten through to her daughter. But then, slowly, Jasmine spoke again. I'll think about what you said, Mom, she said, her voice quieter now. I trust you. I'll be careful. Vanessa exhaled, a sense of relief washing over her. She hadn't expected Jasmine to fully understand right away, but she could tell that her words had planted a seed. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As Vanessa hung up the phone, she felt a new determination settle in her chest. The next move was hers to make. She had to act swiftly and decisively. She had to confront Chris, fully prepared, fully in control. She wasn't just protecting her daughter anymore. She was protecting her life, her future, and her family, and she was ready for the battle ahead. The first strike Vanessa's plan was in motion, and every piece was falling into place. She had called in favors, dug into Chris's past, and, most importantly, she had made Jasmine see the light, at least enough to question Chris's intentions. Now, it was time to make her first real move, to show Chris that she wasn't a woman to be trifled with. It was a cold Tuesday afternoon when Chris showed up again. Vanessa had been expecting him. She was prepared this time, her emotions steady and her mind sharp. This wasn't a conversation she would let him control. She had a plan, and this time, she wasn't going to back down. The knock on the door was just as soft as always, but it carried a certain weight today. Vanessa took a deep breath, her hand steady on the doorknob, and opened it. Chris stood there, as charming as ever, but his smile faltered when he saw the expression on her face. There was no warmth, no friendliness in her eyes. She was ready to fight. Vanessa, we need to talk, Chris said, his voice still smooth, though there was a slight edge to it now. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he could feel the shift in the air. I think it's time we do, Vanessa replied, her voice calm but firm. She wasn't going to let him manipulate her anymore. You've been playing a dangerous game, Chris, and I'm done letting you use me and my daughter. Chris stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he tried to gauge her reaction. What are you talking about? He asked, though the nervousness in his voice betrayed him. I'm just trying to help you. I've always been here for you. Vanessa's eyes locked onto his, unwavering. No, Chris. You've been using me for your own gain. You've been using my daughter, manipulating her, trying to get to me through her. I know about your past, and I know what you're really after. For a moment, Chris just stared at her, disbelief flashing across his face. Then, that facade of confidence cracked. You don't know anything, he snapped. This is all for Jasmine. We're trying to build a life together. You're overreacting. I'm not overreacting, Vanessa said, stepping forward, her voice steady. You've made your intentions clear, and I'm not going to let you tear my family apart. So here's the deal, Chris. You walk away right now and leave us in peace, or I will make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. Chris's expression twisted into something dark, something dangerous. He took a step back, clearly thrown off by the sudden force of her words, but his anger began to boil. You think you can threaten me? He growled. You think you can control this? You're nothing without me, Vanessa. I've got the leverage, and you know it. Vanessa didn't flinch. She was no longer afraid of him. I don't need you for anything, Chris. I've got my own resources, my own power. And if you don't back off, I'll make sure it's the end of your little game. There was a long, tense silence between them. Vanessa could see the wheels turning in Chris's head, as if he was trying to decide whether to push further or cut his losses. For the first time, he seemed unsure, and Vanessa felt a small surge of victory. You're making a big mistake, he said finally, his voice low, filled with venom. "But I'll let you have your little victory for now. Just know that I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Vanessa standing in the doorway, her heart pounding. She had made her first strike, and it had landed. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the one in control, and Chris could see that now. But she knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He would be back, and when he did, she would be ready. The decisive confrontation. It had been 3 days since the confrontation with Chris. Vanessa had expected him to come back, but she hadn't anticipated how soon it would be. The knock on door. Her door came just as the evening sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the living room. She knew it was him before she even looked through the peephole. Vanessa's heart didn't race this time. She wasn't scared. She was ready. With a steady hand, she opened the door, and there he was. Chris, standing with a grim expression, his face now hardened with something darker than before. This time, he wasn't just angry, he was desperate. "We need to talk." "Vanessa," he said, his voice clipped and cold. He wasn't here to play games anymore. Vanessa didn't invite him in. She didn't need to. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning. "Talk about what?" Vanessa replied, her voice cool and steady. "I thought we were done here, Chris." His eyes narrowed, and for a brief moment, she saw a flicker of fear cross his face. "You've made a big mistake," he said. "You think you've won, but you have no idea who you're dealing with. I've got connections, people who can make things very difficult for you, for Jasmine." Vanessa's gaze never wavered. "You can threaten me all you want, but you know I won't back down. What's your plan, Chris? You going to try to ruin my life, destroy everything I've worked for? You think you can use fear to control me?" His jaw clenched. "You're smarter than I thought, but you're still too naive. You have no idea what you've set in motion. If you think I'm just going to walk away, you're wrong. This isn't over." Vanessa's voice lowered, colder now. "I'm not scared of you anymore. You can't intimidate me, and you can't control me. Whatever you try next, I'll be ready." Chris stepped closer, almost nose to nose with her, but Vanessa didn't flinch. She stood tall, unwavering. "You don't understand, do you? You've been playing your little game, but you don't have the power you think you do. You're just a pawn. You're not in charge here, Chris." His eyes flickered with rage, but it wasn't the blind fury she'd seen before. This time, there was something calculating in his eyes, a realization that Vanessa was not the same woman he had confronted before. She wasn't weak, and she wasn't afraid. She had seen through his manipulations, and she had taken control of her own narrative. Vanessa's words hung in the air like a challenge. "I've played your game, and I've already won. You don't have the upper hand anymore. It's over." For a moment, Chris seemed frozen, his confidence shattered. He was cornered, and the realization hit him hard. This wasn't the outcome he had envisioned. He had thought he could intimidate her, pressure her into submission. But Vanessa had turned the tables. She had taken back the power he had been trying to steal. "You're making a big mistake," Chris spat, stepping back toward the door. His voice was strained, and for the first time, there was genuine fear in his eyes. "I don't think so," Vanessa replied, her voice calm but resolute. "I've had enough of your lies, your threats, and your manipulation. I'm done. Don't ever come near me or my family again." Chris hesitated for just a moment longer. Then he turned on his heel and left, slamming the door behind him. Vanessa stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The door was closed. The battle was over, least for now. But she knew this wasn't the end. Chris wouldn't just give up. He would come back, more dangerous than before. But when he did, Vanessa would be ready. She wasn't just protecting herself anymore. She was protecting her daughter, her life, her legacy. The game was no longer in Chris's hands. It was in hers. Resolution and new reality. The days following Chris's departure were tense, but there was a palpable sense of calm in the air. Vanessa had fought the battle and come out victorious, but the victory was bittersweet. She hadn't just faced Chris. She had faced her own fears, her doubts, and her need to protect her daughter at all costs. And now, as the dust settled, she found herself standing stronger than ever before. Vanessa's first priority was Jasmine. She had seen the change in her daughter's eyes after their last conversation. Jasmine hadn't fully understood what Chris was capable of until now, but she had come to terms with the reality of their situation. Slowly, the trust between them began to rebuild. Jasmine wasn't as angry as Vanessa had feared. She was hurt, but she understood the sacrifice her mother had made to shield her from the truth. They sat together one evening, the warmth of the home surrounding them as they shared a quiet dinner. Jasmine broke the silence first, her voice softer than it had been in weeks. "Mom," she began, I'm sorry. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe you, but now I do." Vanessa smiled, a tear escaping down her cheek. "Sweetheart, you don't have to apologize. I just wanted to protect you. And I think now you understand why I did what I did?" Jasmine nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I'm scared, Mom. What if he comes back? What if he keeps coming after us?" Vanessa reached across the table, taking her daughter's hand in hers. "He won't. And if he does, we'll be ready. Together. We've already shown him that we won't back down. We'll face whatever comes, but we'll do it as a family." For the first time in weeks, Vanessa felt a genuine sense of peace wash over her. The weight of the secret, the worry about what Chris might do, seemed to lift. She wasn't just protecting her family. She had reclaimed her own strength, her own power. She had fought for what mattered most. The following days were filled with small victories. Vanessa took steps to ensure that no traces of Chris's influence remained in their lives. She secured her financial future, making sure the $5 million her late husband had left her wasn't just a safety net, but a tool for security and growth. The business dealings that had once seemed so out of reach were now fully under her control. She began consulting with lawyers to ensure that her assets were protected, with Jasmine as her sole heir. There would be no more surprises, no more threats. Jasmine, too, began to rebuild her own sense of self. She started looking for work, determined to stand on her own 2 feet. The events of the past few months had forced her to grow up faster than she had ever expected. But she was stronger. Now, Vanessa knew that, given time, her daughter would flourish in ways she hadn't imagined. One evening, as they sat on the porch together, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Vanessa looked over at Jasmine, a sense of pride filling her heart. "We're okay," Vanessa said softly, her voice filled with conviction. Jasmine smiled, her eyes reflecting the same strength Vanessa had discovered within herself. "Yeah, we are. We're stronger than we ever were before." Vanessa nodded, her heart swelling with love for her daughter. She had fought for this moment, this peace, this strength, and she had won. Chris was gone, and the future, once so uncertain, was now filled with endless possibilities. The battle had been hard, but the victory was sweeter than she could have ever imagined. The unexpected visit, it had been 2 weeks since the confrontation with Chris, and life had begun to return to some semblance of normalcy. Vanessa felt the weight of the past few months slowly lifting from her shoulders. The constant anxiety that had once haunted her every step was now replaced by a quiet confidence. Her relationship with Jasmine had never been stronger. They were building a new life together, one without secrets and threats. But just as the calm seemed to settle in, the phone rang. Vanessa glanced at the caller ID and felt her stomach drop. It was Adrian, the man who had helped her in her fight against Chris. "Hello?" Vanessa answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Vanessa, it's Adrian. We need to talk. Adrian said, his voice tight with urgency. A chill ran down Vanessa's spine. "What's wrong?" "I don't want to alarm you, but there's been some movement with Chris. It's not over yet," Adrian replied. "I need you to meet me, now." Vanessa's heart began to race. She thought it was over. She had believed that Chris was gone, for good, but the cold, hard truth was staring her in the face. She wasn't free yet. "Where?" she asked, the words barely leaving her lips. "I'll send you the address," Adrian said before hanging up. Vanessa stood there for a moment, staring at the phone in her hand. She could feel the old fear creeping back in, but this time it was different. She had learned so much in the past few weeks about herself, about Chris, about the lengths people would go to when they were desperate. She wasn't the same woman who had first opened her door to him. No, she was stronger, smarter, and far more capable of handling whatever Chris might throw her way. With a determined breath, she grabbed her coat and headed out the door. Jasmine was in her room, doing her best to focus on a new job search, her face set with resolve. Vanessa could see the transformation in her daughter's eyes. She was no longer the naive young woman she had been. Jasmine was starting to stand, on her own 2 feet, and Vanessa couldn't have been prouder. "I'm heading out," Vanessa called to Jasmine, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "Everything okay?" Jasmine asked, glancing up from her laptop. "I'm meeting Adrian. He has some new information," Vanessa replied. "Don't worry, I'll be fine. Just stay here, and I'll be back soon." Jasmine nodded, her face a mixture of concern and trust. "Be careful, Mom." Vanessa gave her daughter a reassuring smile before walking out of the house, determination in every step. The air outside was crisp, and the sky above was darkening as the sun dipped lower. She made her way to the address Adrian had sent her, her mind racing with possibilities. What new information could he have? Was Chris really still lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? Or had something else happened? As she arrived at the small, nondescript building on the edge of town, Vanessa's instincts kicked in. The place looked abandoned, the windows dark and uninviting. She parked her car on the street, glancing around before stepping out. There was no sign of Adrian's car, but she wasn't going to let that stop her. Vanessa approached the door cautiously, knocking twice. A moment later, the door opened, revealing Adrian standing in the dimly lit hallway. His face was pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something darker, something that made the hairs on the back of Vanessa's neck stand up. "Vanessa, come inside. We need to talk," Adrian said, his voice low. Vanessa stepped inside, her senses on high alert. The building felt cold, empty, as though it had been abandoned for years. Adrian led her down a narrow hallway to a small room in the back. A single light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting harsh shadows on the walls. A table sat in the center of the room, and on it were several files, photographs, and a laptop. "Sit down," Adrian said, motioning to the chair across from him. Vanessa sat, her eyes scanning the room. "What's going on, Adrian? What have you found?" Adrian took a deep breath before speaking, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been digging deeper, trying to find out who Chris really is. And let me tell you, what I found, it's bad, Vanessa. Worse than I thought." Vanessa's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" Adrian opened one of the files in front of him, pulling out a photograph. He slid it across the table to her. It was a picture of Chris, but there was something in his eyes that made Vanessa's stomach turn. The man in the photo wasn't the charming, suave Chris she had known. This was someone else entirely. A man with a dangerous edge, someone who had clearly been involved in something illegal. "Chris is connected to a larger network of criminals," Adrian explained. "People who won't hesitate to go after anyone who stands in their way, and it looks like you're at the top of their list." Vanessa felt the air leave her lungs. This wasn't just about money anymore. Chris wasn't just trying to get To her wealth, he was part of something much bigger, and now that world was closing in on her. What do we do? Vanessa asked, her voice barely a whisper. We fight back, Adrian said, his tone resolute. You've got the power, the resources, the knowledge. We're going to take this to the authorities, expose everything. But it's going to take more than just the two of us. We need to bring in the right people, and we need to move fast. Vanessa's heart pounded in her chest as the weight of the situation settled on her shoulders. She had thought she was done. She had thought she had won. But this fight was far from over. The real battle was just beginning, and this time, there was no turning back. The final strike. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and late-night strategy sessions. Vanessa had never felt more alive. Every decision she made, every step she took, was a battle in the war she was waging against Chris and his dangerous network. Adrian had been invaluable, connecting her with trusted law enforcement contacts, and even a few private investigators who owed him favors from his years of work in security. With their help, they built a case against Chris, piecing together evidence that tied him to an underground crime syndicate. They had no choice but to act fast. Vanessa wasn't just fighting for her money anymore. She was fighting for her life, and Jasmine's. Vanessa's phone rang late one night, just as she was about to go to bed. It was Adrian. Vanessa, it's time. We've got enough to bring him down. The authorities are ready to move, but we need you there. Are you in? She didn't hesitate. Yes, I'm in. The next morning, Vanessa and Adrian met with a team of investigators at a local law office. They laid out their plan. Chris's network would be exposed, his operations shut down, and the people he had harmed would finally see justice. There was no turning back now. Vanessa wasn't just going to sit back and let the system take over. She was going to take control of her destiny. The plan was set in motion quickly. The authorities would move in on Chris's operations while Vanessa and her team gathered the final pieces of evidence to secure the case. It wasn't a simple task. It was dangerous. But Vanessa was more determined than ever to see it through. The day of the operation arrived, and Vanessa stood outside the courthouse, watching as law enforcement moved into position. She had learned the hard way that the truth was more powerful than any threat. Chris had tried to control her, tried to break her, but he had underestimated her strength, her resilience. Now, he was going to pay the price. As the news of Chris's arrest spread, Vanessa felt a sense of finality. The weight that had been pressing on her for months, for years, was gone. She had fought back, and she had won. Chris would face justice for everything he had done, for all the lives he had manipulated and destroyed. Vanessa didn't celebrate. This wasn't a victory that warranted a party or a grand gesture. It was a quiet victory. A victory for herself, for Jasmine, and for the people who had been hurt along the way. She had fought not just for the money, but for her right to live her life on her own terms. Days later, Vanessa and Jasmine sat in their living room, the house quiet and peaceful. Jasmine looked at her mother, a sense of understanding and respect in her eyes. "I never realized how strong you are, Mom," Jasmine said softly. "You've been through so much, and you never let it break you." Vanessa smiled, her heart full. "We're stronger together, sweetheart. Always." For the first time in a long time, Vanessa felt truly free. The threat had passed, and she had emerged victorious, stronger than she had ever been before. As the months went by, Vanessa rebuilt her life, with Jasmine by her side. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters, thriving in a world they had taken control of. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer held her back. The future, once clouded by fear and uncertainty, was now bright with possibility, and with each passing day, Vanessa knew that she had truly won. Not because of the money, not because of the fight, but because she had found her own strength, her own power, and that was something no one, especially not Chris, could ever take from her. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched you, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Stay healthy and value yourselves.